time for to be available and for this. Thank you, Rajat.
Well, not a problem, Leo. I mean, this is something that I'm glad we're doing this. I think we don't do a whole lot of this, and talking to current students also allows me to really figure out how you guys are doing. And it's been about a year and a half since we last spoke, or slightly longer. So yeah, I think let's get started.
Sure. So Rajat, the other time we spoke, yeah, as you were saying, almost 2 years ago. It's been a while. I remember you were telling me several things about your career, how you chose to join business school, like how you applied in round 1, and then you applied in round 2, and you got into full scholarship, like amazing for entrepreneurship, which is what you ended up doing later on. So I was very surprised about these initial things, but we didn't really speak a lot more further after that, like about your decision making, about other things that you made in your career. And now, so after that call, I was accepted at Wharton. I joined Wharton. I'm almost finishing my second year, so I will be graduating this May, and I have a job offer already. I'll be joining Amazon, which is exactly what I wrote in my essay, actually, for full time next semester, for product management, which is a little bit similar to what you do as well, like creating a new product, launching a new thing. And I'm taking this class now, which is called Understanding Careers and Executive Job. It's basically understanding, like, a more long term, what are the possible options. Should you go into a company, stay for a long time, switch to a different one, create your own company if you have that inclination, like depending on your motivations. So it's very interesting, and a really big part of that class is trying to think about what I want to do in 10 years and 20 years, and talk to people who had experience in similar fields, or maybe not 100% similar fields, but kind of similar. And it's really important to have at least one person that has a really similar background that wants to do a very similar thing. And I thought, oh my God, I talked to Rajat already. He's probably super busy. But I remember that we had this opening of speaking. So I was like, why not, right? I have to know if I don't try asking. So I sent you a message, and you're like, surely, let's do it. I was like, yes, got it. So I'm happy to be able to talk to you. Thanks again, Rajat. And it's very open-ended. So I asked my professor, Professor Matthew Bidwell in the Wharton School, and he, like, if there are any questions, like a specific structure for this final project interview. And he said, no specific structure. Just ask them about their career, right? So I'm gonna talk to 3 different people. I could even choose my parents for that if I wanted. But I think you were the first person who came to my mind, and I'm happy to be talking to you now. So it's very open-ended. Like, I remember a little bit of your story. Let me try to rephrase it, and you can correct me. Sure. And then I'd love to hear more after that. So you graduated with your MBA. You were working in Germany, I believe. You were
prior to the MBA.
In Germany before your MBA, and then you joined. You went to California, right?
No, so I was in Germany, then I joined in Babson, in Boston.
Babson?
Yeah.
Boston, yeah.
And then
Babson has a San Francisco campus, but I think it's only for executive.
That's executive.
Right?
That's exact, yes.
Yeah. Okay. I remember I saw all their marketing material everywhere in San Francisco when I was there, but it's cool. So then after that, like, it took you a while before you started up e-GMAT, right?
5 years, I would say.
And what did you do in that meantime, like before you created e-GMAT?
So I think let's kind of go prior to me joining Babson, and I think so. If you're trying to really figure out how I made decisions, if that's what the intent is, I think we should go there. So prior to joining Babson, I was a researcher at Nokia. I had a desire to do business, but it wasn't still a want or a need. If we kind of go over there, it was like, man, it'd be nice if I did business. So
you have a master's as well, right? I remember you mentioned you got a scholarship from Nokia. Like 4 people or 5 people in the world got it, and you were one
of the 2 people who got the scholarship that year. Yes. So it was a master's in chip design, Nokia sponsored, and after the master's, I went and worked for Nokia, and I was like this hardcore researcher who kind of work on things that actually came out in 2012, 2013. And so I worked there for 3.5 years, had a lot of fun, had a lot of money to play with, by the way. Nokia had gave like a lot of money. It's like, man, I'm working on the $6 million project, and I could do whatever I can, and then all that stuff. So so and then I kind of asked myself, but whatever I was doing was so futuristic. I had no say in whether it goes in a product. So even though I loved the space, even though I loved research, one thing that it told me was I want to be in the power of making decisions. So that's kind of where, that passion for wireless technology, which is what I had after I did my undergrad as well as my grad degree, turned into passion for building products. Because I knew, because I knew that I could do the tech part, or I could do the product building part, but I want to make sure that I understand how the hell do I sell the product, because I couldn't really sell my ideas internally within Nokia. We were a part of a research center, so the product teams were kind of very far away. So that was the inclination for an MBA. So I went to Babson, and then again, serendipity, full scholarship. Babson wasn't my dream school when I started thinking about an MBA. I was thinking of much higher ranked schools. But then when I read Babson's prospectus, when, Payal was my wife, she went there and then she visited the campus, because she was in the States already and I was in Germany. And she visited a few other campuses. The culture really clicked with her. So I chose Babson, and that was, I think, for me, one of the pivotal points where, because I had this desire to do my business, but it wasn't a want. But when you go to Babson, what you really see is every third guy is thinking of running a business. They make you do all of these pitches, and there are like 4 or 5 pitching things during the 2 years that you go through.
4 or 5 what?
Business plan pitches.
Yeah.
And everyone's pitching. So, I mean, even people who have no desire, they're pitching. But then one of the other things that Babson also has is a lot of family business, especially from South America, and now also from India. So you get these people who are already running businesses who are coming there and they're pitching. So you kind of learn from them. And even though they're not, $100 million or $1 billion businesses, these are like $3-4 million, $5 million businesses. So you get to learn a lot from that. And the other thing that you get to really say is, hey, if that guy can do it, why can't I? I mean, it seems I'm smarter than him. So from a desire, running a business became a want for me. And then a lot of the experiences that I had at Babson were around building new businesses. So I got to work with lots of startups while I was at Babson. So that was like 60% of my resume when I graduated. My work at Nokia was about 25% of my resume in my post.
Whoa, really?
So because of all those internships and the impacts that I made over there. So then we moved to Phoenix because my in-laws live over here. So, and Babson has really no network in Phoenix, Arizona. So I had to find a job. And because of all of those experiences, I was able to get a call within 5 days of landing in Phoenix. And this was from Honeywell. And what they were looking for is Honeywell in their labs had created this new wireless technology for the industrial world. And they wanted someone who could really look for applications on it. So they had this umbrella wireless technology, and they said, man, and they serve the industrial world, which is, think of it as a pulp.
Like oil and gas?
Like oil and gas was a big vertical, pulp and paper was a big vertical, PPP, so power plants were a big vertical over there. And chemicals was different from oil and gas, which is a big vertical as well. So I said, go talk to customers, figure out, look at what their processes are, and then figure out where can you, use this core technology that we've developed and build applications and solutions around it, because the business was called Honeywell Solutions. So there again, I got this freedom to build. So the idea over there was take a business that has a market size, or take a potential market size of between $50 to $200 million. Okay. Work with the product team. So Honeywell had a fairly large engineering team that I had access to. And so pitch the idea to management, get the first 300K of funding, prove the idea, then get the next $3-4 million worth of funding, start the business, get the first $2 million worth of revenue, move on to the next business. So I did about 3 or 4 of these during the 5 years over there. And when I did this, I thought, man, I'm done making money for someone else. And I'm ready. So that's when it became a need for me. And then even though it was like the it was 2008, 2009 when we made that decision. It was like the worst time, and if you think about the economic downturn had happened. But I was always confident if nothing worked out, I could always come back to the industry. So that confidence allowed me to really say, let's kind of get into business. That was kind of the things, like, let's get into business. And then I said, what do I love? I love technology. I love education. My father's a teacher. Pile's mom's a teacher. So we said, and then what do we know in education? Where we could do a B2C, because we didn't have the money to do a B2B. So that's where we said, we know the GMAT. So that's how e-GMAT started. So then Payal left her job, and she said, we've got to do this well. She left her job. We spent about a year and a half creating the first version of e-GMAT with about $10,000 worth of investment. And we launched. So that's kind of.
That's really cool. That's really cool. But it's cool how you had the chance to do something entrepreneurial as well before, within Honeywell, right? Like, even though like you already had a core technology that you needed to find a customer, it's kind of like opposite of what usually you do or what you did later on with the GMAT. But it's really cool how you had this chance to interact with different teams.
Yeah, experience in Honeywell taught me a lot about segments, looking at segments and finding, okay, who do you want to go after? And that was, I think, one of the most valuable things I learned over there. We had this internal marketing cohort where we were taught need-based marketing. So our EVP of marketing, she had these courses that I took. It says, you've got to really, if you have to find out unmet needs, you have to create segments, classify the needs. And for her, segmentation was 4 things. It's like a group of customers who have the same needs, assign the same priority to those needs, have a similar willingness to pay, and for whom our cost to serve is the same. And that precision allowed me to kind of apply that not just to the businesses that I built within Honeywell, but also to everything that we've been doing since then.
This is so cool, Rajat. This is really cool. And how many years you stayed in Honeywell before
so 2006 July to 2011 July, so about 5 years, I would say.
5 years, and then you went straight to like starting to prepare and work for one and a half year before you actually launched.
Payal had already left her job in 2009. So Payal worked on a year and a half. We launched e-GMAT in 2010 August as an experiment. So we put it a year and a half. We did actually some pro bono experiments with about 400, 500 people. So in the year and a half that Payal built the first product, which was just the sentence correction course, by the way, nothing else. It was 1/6 of the GMAT. We went through 3 iterations of the course, and then we launched it on 2nd of August 2010, and so the first 1 year was still an experimentation for us, where we could say, hey, can we do a better job than classroom courses? That was our benchmark then. And then can we generate more success than a classroom course can at the price, which was at that time the price of a book. And once we proved ourselves, once the business grew enough that it could feed the household, that's when I left my job in August of 2011.
Oh, I see. So you were still like having a portfolio approach. Let's say you're not like all in without having a little bit more data on like, can this actually support the family?
Yeah, it had to be, right? Otherwise it wasn't sustainable. I mean, when you go in, you go all in, and when you go all in, you shouldn't have to worry about, man, am I going to be able to sustain myself? And this was especially important for us. Why? Because one of the things that happened to us in the 2008, 2009 housing downturn was that we basically lost all the equity in our house, because we bought our first house in 2006. And unlike many people, we actually put 25% down. So all our savings went into the house. And by the time 2009 happened, the house had devalued so much that it's like all that money had evaporated. So we had $30,000 in the bank account. And that is all that we had to go off. So we had to take the business to a level where we said, hey, we're not going to touch that $30,000.
I see. And what about how did like family, like creating a family? I don't know if you if you have children or if you're thinking about that, like how did that affect the decision of like maybe doing this experiment while you're also working?
That's a very interesting point. So 2008, 2007 December was when my first daughter was born. So 2008 July is when we decided we are going to do this business. And one of the reasons why we said we're going to do this business is to really say, hey, we can take two approaches. One is we have a new family, and we say, man, let's be conservative. The other thing is, hey, I turned 30. Like, if we don't do it now, we would never do it. Statistically speaking, it's not going to happen. And the fact that we have confidence that we could always go back to the industry allowed us to really just, take that leap of faith. I mean, for Payal, she left her job at Honeywell and she went to Boston when I did my MBA. Her boss actually reached out to her in Boston. This is 2004. We were talking about saying, hey, you work from here, from Boston for me. I mean, at that time, working virtually was unheard of, right? WebEx was just launched at that time. You're talking about,
Oh,
and she worked virtually for 6 months because her boss reached out, not because she wanted. So we always had those strong connections back in the industry that we could get back, even in the worst of times. So I think that confidence allowed us to do it at that time. And yeah.
mm. And did you get any funding, or did you need to borrow anything, or just bootstrap it?
We were bootstrapped completely for the first 4 years. We raised a bit of money from Piles, an alumnus of BITS Pilani, which is an elite engineering school out of India, and they have their alumni actually have this angel funding group, and they reached out to us and said, hey, do you guys need some money? And we said, sure, why not? And it was a very quick turnaround where we raised about 200 grand from there. But that was more as a safety net. We never touched that money. It's still lying in a bank account, by the way.
I see.
So we were always, I mean, for us, it has always been, I mean, one of the things that I learned at Babson was entrepreneurship is cash flow positive. You have to be cash flow positive. And that's something which I think they ingrained that in me. And since then, we probably have had 3 months in the 10, but if you think about it, about 10 years of our existence when we've not been cash flow positive.
Well, I thought maybe this can be taught to people like WeWork founder and other stuff like.
I think those are different businesses, frankly.
Yeah.
Even there you could structure. So there are businesses. So I was at MIT in 2016, and I had a discussion with one of their entrepreneurship professors about the kind of tech businesses. And in one of the tech businesses, and because I talked about Babson, and he talked about what they teach over there at MIT, and he said, hey, we're talking about two very different scales of businesses. So a business such as HubSpot, which came out of MIT, is one that requires 2 to 3 years of investment. You need about $50 to $80 million worth of funding to be able to scale it to that point where it starts to become. So I'm not against it as long as that money is spent responsibly and as long as the processes are put in place. It's just that the situation that we were in, the timing of things, meant that we always had to maintain that discipline.
Yeah,
and one of the other things is, I mean, ours is a business where you don't have repeat customers. I mean, a person comes to us, buys the course once, and in 6 months goes away. A lot of the businesses where you invest a lot of money are where you say, hey, I'll have a high cost of acquisition for my customer. I'll have a high upfront engineering cost, which, by the way, we also did.
But the lifetime value.
But the lifetime value part. And for us, the lifetime value part was kind of not there in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, only like maybe referrals, right? You can get people who really like to refer to other people, but they won't need to do it GMAT again if everything works well, right?
If everything works well, otherwise we don't have a business then. If everything doesn't work well, then we won't grow anyway. Then there would be bad referrals then.
Yeah. And do you think about maybe expanding to like different kind of tests or different, like using a little bit of the skills, because like sentence correction, many of these other things are also in a certain way in the GRE and other tests like that. I don't know if you guys are thinking about that kind of stuff.
So the subject matter part is not a challenge, frankly. I mean, the key thing which is there. So are we thinking? The short answer is yes. Why have we not done? It's because I think it's where we want the GMAT. So for us, the philosophy has always been, excel so much that you're way beyond the competition, and then only go wide. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we started with only sentence correction first, then added critical reasoning, then added reading comprehension a year later. Because again, as I said, the focus is profitability. When you are the best in something, then you also, even with marketing spend, you're always profitable because the conversion rates are high, right? So for example, our typical registration to conversion rates are about 12 to 13% right now, which is about 2.5 to 3 times of what the industry average is. You think about it. Our
It's really high.
cost to serve a customer is not as high because of the support architecture that we've built in. So in the GMAT space, where when we started, we said we want to be better than a classroom course, and now we've evolved and we were better than a classroom course in 2016 for all aspects of the GMAT. Okay.
Yes.
And now we want to really be where we want to be better than a private tutor. Okay, and we're using technology, and we are about 10 months away from it. With regards to the platform,
yeah,
very different from when we started.
Like in my opinion, even when I took it 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, it was already better than any private tutor that I would imagine. I didn't try any private tutor for GMAT in particular, but I tried private tutors for other stuff when I was younger, or like for TOEFL when many years before. And I think this is just because it's just so effective. I can choose, I can search for what I need. There is the Scholar menu, which helps like doing the feedback part. And if I don't understand something, I can watch a video, and like 1 minute of that video is so much more efficient than talking to someone, and they will understand. They'll try different ways to explain. Like you guys have.
So I think you're absolutely right. So that's kind of where you always have to take a segments approach, Leo. So you were someone who was a diligent guy. Okay.
Yeah.
For you, we were actually a much better option than a private tutor because of all the analytics, because of you could really figure that personalization out by yourself, given what was there. Right.
Yeah, but for different segments.
But for different segments of people, that's kind of where, I want to be able to really say someone who starts at a 450 and who could possibly invest $20,000 on a private tutor, I want to give him better value at $500. Okay. And I want him to envision his score improvement to a 740. And we have all the elements in place. We kind of built a lot of those things in place over the last few years. It's all about kind of making them more cohesive so that even a guy who's starting at a 400 can figure out, okay, this is the path that I'm going to take. And
what about the? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's kind of where we're investing a lot of. I mean, we have 8 full-time technology resources doing just that. And then we have experiments that we run in the company where we take groups of students and we really say, okay, what if I put 3 people with these 300 people who are kind of constantly checking in, and what kind of check-in steps points make sense? So think of how AI is built today. A lot of how AI is built today is people actually doing those things on a computer, then taking the best practices out of it. We're doing some very similar things within the company.
That's so cool, Rajat. This sounds very exciting. So
it is very interesting. I mean, we are people. As I'm a product person. I'm still a product person that way. So if you actually take the current issue of Harvard Business Review, and it's about how do you build AI, we are doing some of those things over there. It says how do you build a culture of experimentation. It also talks about AI. And if you take New York Times current issue on machine learning and AI, and you combine all of those things, we're doing about 40% of those right now.
That's so cool. And I'm thinking, I was also thinking about this part about like motivation, like how can you get people who are like struggling if you don't have a person next to them to like really be able to hold their hand, let's say, and try to show like there's a way, like don't give up, we can do it together, something like that, without a person necessarily to do that, right? Especially if you go there, you try first time and you get 500, you're like, oh my God, I will never be able to do this. It's impossible, right? Maybe the check-ins that you're mentioning, you can experiment with several different things and maybe even.
So here's something that's very interesting. What has happened over the last 2 years? So over the last 2 years, I've not done as many, but I've done probably 50 odd. Remember the debriefing session that you and I had 2 years back? I've done about 50 of these. And not every debriefing session ends up going into our YouTube channel just because in the past we didn't have the bandwidth to do this. But everyone who I asked, so each of those 50 people I asked, is like, most of them are 100 or more points of score improvement. And I asked, okay, what kept you motivated during the study? Okay, some of them are even 200, 250. And they say, you would send those video interviews our way. Those, whenever we were demotivated, we would go back to them and we would watch and they would, it's the same feeling. If this guy can do it, why can't I? And that's why we keep those interviews unedited, because that's kind of where the guys who are, it's boring for many people, but if you're someone who's really interested in doing this, that's where it becomes very motivational. Now, to what you were saying, there's a level of personalization that can be done over it. So if you're someone who's struggling with SC, a platform can recognize you're struggling with SC, and if Leo figured out how to do SC better, we can send you to that part of the success story. So now that's where you're doing that tagging. But before that, let's kind of do some experimentation, manually send the guy with that email. And if that works, the guy comes back, let's build that as an automation. That's kind of the approach that we have. So
that's great. I mean, this sounds really, I think, I'm a product person as well. I think doing something like what you're doing in your day-to-day right now, like trying to figure this out, trying to find the segments, try to improve their experience and maybe give them a better value, not just like cost benefit, but even like a better value at all, personalized than the tutor. This sounds really exciting. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you. But I also was thinking, like, what about the alternatives, right? What about if you continue in a big company like Honeywell and stay for a long time? Maybe you can help other product people that will be reporting to you to create many different things. So maybe you're like having wireless technology for control valves, but you're also thinking about having a new, novel wireless protocol that can be used in that situation or in that other situation. It sounds very exciting as well. Maybe not in a monetary way because you're working a lot. You're happy with the work, but maybe you're not being rewarded in the same way as if you owned the whole company, right? But I don't know
how the company is structured. I mean, if you think about Amazon, Google, if you also think about more more mid-level mid-size companies, not large conglomerates, but so I think in the large companies you have the FANG group and a few other startups, but then there are also lots and lots of mid-sized companies where you could work like this and make a difference, and there you could actually make more money than what I do, and you won't have the worry that I am. And for me, I have to be profitable every day because I have a daily set of costs, right? Every day, am I profitable today or not? So you won't sleep with that worry. You'd rather focus just on innovation. So I think so it depends on, I think for me, it depends on the structure of the company, which is okay, how is the company structured? How do they make decisions? And there are these companies that allow you that freedom to make decisions and reward you accordingly. So I mean, if you think about it, we say Google as a company, we call it a search company, and a lot of times, Google's credited, their success is credited to one of two things, which is, hey, the fact that they had this search algorithm that Sergey and Larry built, but and the second thing that it's credited to is this amazing infrastructure that they have, which allows them to scale elastically. But one thing which they're not credited for is the fact that pretty much anyone in the company can do an A/B test, and they have very strong metrics as to how and when they do A/B tests, and which allows them to improve. I mean, if you think about why is it that Google gets things right so many times? It's about the A/B testing. Same thing with Facebook, and so on and so forth. So if you go in a company that has a culture of such experimentation, and where not everything needs to succeed, because knowing what doesn't work is also very, very, very valuable. Yes. Because then you don't devote your time towards it.
Yeah, that experimentation culture is something I was really looking for. Like that, prior to Wharton, I worked in a private equity company, but we were doing I had a lot of autonomy to work with the portfolio companies. I was doing mostly operations stuff. I talked to some friends that had internships at Google, Facebook, like other tech companies like that. And I think the autonomy is a little harder because it's a much bigger company, right? You need someone to get them on a call. So even though you're doing experiments and you're testing things out, if you want to move ahead and maybe do something different, you still need all these different uh, it's inevitable, I think, when you get larger. I think Amazon tries to make it a little more
So
a
I
little
think here is
faster.
one of those things which is really important. And there's something that we also struggle with e-GMAT. We're about 50 people now. Pyle and I are sitting over here. We have 42 people in India, but another 4 or 5 over here in addition to this. So, and inevitably, we, as an organization, we're very flat, which means a lot of things come to us. So, and this is something which we've been trying to coach back within the company, where what we say is, hey, ultimately, when you are presenting an alternative to me, do one of three things. One is make sure you cover majority of the failure modes. Okay, think of failure. Do not think just of success. Think of failure.
Yeah.
Because when you're changing something, it's type A versus type B error, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you've covered 80% of the failure modes, I'll identify the other 20%, but you will be covering those 20%, but I'll have the confidence that you do a good job because you've done a good job with the first 80%.
Yeah.
The second thing is,
try to prove yourself wrong, right? Like
yes,
instead of
try
like
to prove
trying to prove
yourself
that.
wrong. Exactly. Right. And the second thing is then give a proposal that's so slam dunk that that I would be stupid not to approve it. So prove that to me that I'm stupid if I'm not approving it. So as long as you do it, you will get the approval. The cases in which you won't get the approval, which is where you're talking about in larger companies, is if you really present something to me and then say, this is a good option, but you decide whether this is going to work. If I have to decide, then I would also go and do that project. But I have other things that I'm doing, which is why you're presenting this to me, right? So if you do that upfront work again at your own end, and if it's a slam dunk to me, then I will not only decide whether this needs to be done or not, I will also give you the resources.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, one of the nice
Yeah.
things about companies today, and a good chunk of companies today, if you look at statistical historical data, companies have cash.
Yes.
Right? I mean, 2004 versus 2018, 2019, the amount of the balance sheets, the cash hold is about 3x more. And they're paying way more dividends till the coronavirus epidemic happened, right? Just because they didn't know what to do with that cash. So it's not that they have a problem with investing money, but they don't want to waste money. So if you make that decision simple enough, and that's, I
Yeah,
think,
that's a
an
good point.
area where business schools really need to do a slightly better job than what they do.
Yeah, I think the convincing part, like really having a strong position, having a very strict analysis, like being able to analyze things and thinking about all the possible ways that it could failure. That's a very important part. But also, there's a lot of protocols and a lot of how can I say, like bureaucracy. As the company gets larger, of course, this has to happen, right? Like you have to have some kind of report. It cannot be 100% flat as it grows. Like you have 50 people, and imagine when you have 150, 1,000, 5,000 people. It's really hard to get that, right? And I worked. I had a chance to work in two very different companies during as two different internships. I worked at Johnson & Johnson, which is really big conglomerate, and Firefly, which is much smaller, even though they had offices in Turkey, they had offices in New York and San Francisco. It was much more horizontal, like much flatter, right? The decision making, of course, much smaller company, and I think it's such a different way to work when things are faster, when things are like really
No,
you can
I
implement
agree
them.
with what you're saying. I completely agree with that. But I think that's kind of where, in a larger company, the same thing I had with Honeywell, right? First 2 years, I told you I was supposed to build businesses. First 2 years, man, I came up with such good ideas. I would go to them; they wouldn't approve of it. Why? Because I would go out of their investment planning cycle. And the second thing, I wasn't using the standard formats. I wasn't approaching the right people to doing this. Now, it took me 2 years to learn that. Why? Because no one told me I had to learn this. all I was doing was good marketing and business development, but not without worrying about the internal processes.
Influence, yeah,
Yes,
political influence.
but at the end of second year, someone told me, hey, here is this forum that has about $500,000 left. You have this idea. Why don't you pitch to them? I created 4 slides. I went there. And by the end of the day, I had 150K allocated to me. I was like, man, how the hell did this happen? I mean, I've been trying to get 150K for a year and a half. I have all of these decks, and now I've put these 4 slides in this format, which they wanted. And man, I got 150K by the end of the day. And then I kind of said, okay, so I need to learn the process. I need to kind of figure out how to go to doing that. Next year, I had 2 million. So I agree this is there, and that's where I think you can't resist learning those processes. You've got to learn those processes.
Yes.
Put in that investment yourself too, because again, it's the same thing. If you produce something in a non-standard form and give it to people who have to make a decision, you're asking them do the analysis and make a decision.
Yeah, much harder, right? It's like a product decision, right? How can you make it easier for the user to
really go and buy the product? I mean, those guys are also humans in the end. They may have certain biases, but they're humans. It's like there is a saying, no one ever got fired for buying an IBM in technology. In the same way, if you put stuff in the standard format for them, IBM is in some ways a standard, right? You put stuff in the standard format for them, and if it's checking all the boxes, and which is what you need to really make sure, which boxes do they need to check to be able to give you a go forward? They will give you a go forward because no one can fire them. If you put it in non-standard format and they give you money, they would get fired.
That makes sense. And Rajat, I don't know how much time do you have? Like, do you have to run for another call or something?
I have about 5 minutes, yes.
Okay. So another question I wanted to ask you is, imagine this situation, right? Like you were clearly showing, like you can learn the skills, you can learn different levels of influence and understand how a company functions. After a while, you learn the specifics, and you'll be able to do that even in a larger company, which is one of the things that I'm keeping as a hypothesis, right? Should I do similar to Rajat, learn a lot and maybe create my own company, or should I just stay in a larger company and still be happy and have a fulfilling life and help impact people as I want, even in a larger company like that? What factors would you consider if you were to maybe not launch e-GMAT and maybe stay in a different company, or maybe even create a similar product outside of being your own? Like, what would make you stay in a bigger company instead of launching e-GMAT?
We are all about being able to create. People like me. Okay, do I get that freedom to create? And then, I think that's kind of where it is. Do I get that freedom to create? I think that's all I care about in the end.
Because if you think about it, like if you had one of those companies that have all that cash, they could give you all the money and they wanted you to build the same product, you'd probably be able to do that even more quickly, right? You have more people working.
There are chasms in every organization. Remember this, right? And which you have to overcome. So money is actually the easiest thing to get.
Yeah.
The most challenging thing to get is good engineers. And then I will tell you, for the majority of the last 10 years, I've worked hard, but when I was at Honeywell, I worked harder. For the first 5 years, I missed for my first kid, which was my first daughter we had when I was at Honeywell. I missed her when she sat for the first time. I missed when she walked for the first time. I missed when she said her first word, because I was traveling all the time.
Oh.
I used to do conference calls, waking up at 3 a.m. with Europe. So I've not done that at all with e-GMAT.
Whoa, even with an India office?
Yeah, no, India office, I worked till midnight. So I for 10 years, I worked, till midnight, till 1 a.m, but I never woke up at 3 a.m. to do a conference call.
Right.
So, and the other thing is, since I work from home, I see my kids, I take them off. Drop them off at school. Someone brings them back. I'm there. So
I think you have to go, Rajat. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I would love to, I can send you an email and we can schedule for the call. I wish you a great day. Thank you so much, Rajat. I don't
Thank
want to take more
you.
time.
All right,
It
bye-bye.
was very helpful. Bye bye.